Commander Zektar stared at the holographic display floating above his command console. Red warning indicators pulsed across the star map like infected wounds. Another colony had gone dark. The third one this cycle. "Sir, we're receiving the final transmission from Kepler Station," Communications Officer Viral announced, her blue-scaled hands trembling as she worked the controls. It's the same as the others." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's systems. Zektar's 4 eyes narrowed as the audio crackled through the speakers. Static mixed with screaming, then an inhuman roar that made his exoskeleton shiver. The transmission cut to dead silence. "That makes 47 colonies in the past solar rotation," Science Officer Thane reported, his tentacles writhing nervously. "The Shadow Fleet is moving faster than our projections indicated." Zektar turned away from the display. The Shadow Fleet had appeared seemingly from nowhere 6 months ago. Ships black as the void between stars, immune to their most powerful weapons. They consumed everything in their path, leaving nothing but empty space where thriving worlds once existed. The Galactic Council had tried everything. Their combined fleets, representing 12 different species, had thrown themselves against the Shadow Fleet time and again. Each battle ended the same way: complete annihilation of Council forces while the enemy remained untouched. "Sir," Vrel's voice barely above a whisper, "Admiral Korth is requesting immediate conference. All surviving fleet commanders are to report to the emergency session." Within the hour, Zektar found himself in the Council's war room aboard the massive station orbiting Nexus Prime. The chamber that once held representatives from dozens of species now hosted only 12 desperate commanders. Empty seats reminded everyone of worlds that no longer existed. Admiral Korth, a massive reptilian with scars covering his armored hide, stood at the center of the room. His yellow eyes held a weariness that spoke of too many defeats. "The situation is beyond critical," Korth began without preamble. "Our analysts estimate the Shadow Fleet will reach the core worlds within 30 cycles. All military options have been exhausted." Commander Isel of the Serpentine Coalition raised her elongated head. "What about the forbidden sectors? The regions we declared off limits after the last expansion war?" Murmurs rippled through the room. Everyone knew what she meant, but nobody wanted to say it aloud. "You're suggesting we contact them?" Commander Brix of the Crystal Empire asked, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. Admiral Korth's expression darkened. "The humans were isolated for good reason. Their methods during the expansion wars were disturbing. We agreed their aggressive nature posed too great a threat to galactic peace." "Peace?" Commander Zektar stood, surprising himself with his boldness. "What peace?" "We're being exterminated. Every day brings us closer to complete extinction." "The humans slaughtered billions during their expansion," Admiral Korth countered. "They showed no mercy, no restraint. We contained them to their small corner of the galaxy to protect ourselves." "From what I've heard," Zektar continued, "they didn't start those wars. They were defending themselves from our peaceful expansion into their territory." The room erupted in angry voices. Some commanders supported Zektar's position, while others shouted about human brutality. Admiral Korth slammed his massive fist on the table, creating a crack in the metal surface. "Enough. The humans are savage warmongers. We have documented evidence of their capacity for violence. They turned entire star systems into graveyards. And yet," Commander Isel hissed, "they stopped at their borders. After defeating our expansion fleets, they withdrew to their original territory. If they were truly monsters, why didn't they continue their advance?" Zektar accessed his personal files through his neural implant. "I've been reviewing the classified records from the expansion wars. The humans sent multiple diplomatic offers before any fighting began. We rejected everyone. They were stalling tactics," Admiral Korth growled. "Were they?" Zektar projected the documents for all to see. "Look at the proposals. Mutual defense agreements, technology sharing, cultural exchange programs. These don't sound like the demands of aggressive conquerors." The room fell quiet as the commanders reviewed the historical data. Many were seeing these documents for the first time, as they had been classified far above most security clearances. Commander Thrix of the Avian Republic spoke softly. "My grandfather fought in those wars. He always said the humans fought differently than other species. They seemed to mourn their enemies even while destroying them." "Propaganda," Admiral Korth spat, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Zektar pulled up battle recordings. "Watch how they treated prisoners. See how they provided medical aid to wounded enemies. Compare that to how we typically conduct warfare. The evidence was overwhelming. Human forces had consistently followed what they called rules of engagement, even when it put them at tactical disadvantage. They had established field hospitals that treated injured soldiers from both sides. They had refused to target civilian populations despite facing enemies who showed no such restraint. The Shadow Fleet doesn't take prisoners, Commander Easel observed. They don't negotiate. They simply consume. Perhaps we need someone who understands their mindset. Admiral Korth's shoulders sagged. Even if I agreed to contact them, the humans have been isolated for over 200 years. We don't even know if they're still alive. For all we know, they destroyed themselves with their own violence. Or maybe, Zektar said quietly, they've been preparing for something like this. The Admiral stared at him for a long moment. Around the room, the remaining commanders of the galaxy's greatest civilizations waited for a decision that could determine whether any of them would see another year. Very well, Admiral Korth finally said. I'll authorize a diplomatic mission to human space. But I want volunteers only. This could be a death sentence either way. Every hand in the room rose immediately. Then we'll draw lots, the Admiral decided. Someone needs to stay and coordinate our remaining defenses. As they prepared for what might be the galaxy's last desperate gamble, none of them noticed the small human probe that had been silently observing from the edge of the system. Its message had already been transmitted across the quantum network, racing toward the borders of human space at faster-than-light speeds. The message was simple. They're finally coming to talk. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching the alien ship approach through the viewport. After 200 years of isolation, this was the first non-human vessel to enter the Sol system. The diplomatic cruiser looked elegant compared to human warships, all smooth curves and gleaming metal. It reminded her of a work of art rather than a tool of war. They're requesting permission to dock, Lieutenant Torres reported from the bridge communication station. Granted. Have them dock at Bay 7. Full diplomatic honors. Sarah turned to face her crew. Remember, these people might be our enemies' enemies, but they're not our friends. Not yet. The airlock hissed open an hour later, and Sarah got her first look at living aliens in over 2 centuries. Commander Zektar stepped through first. His forearms held in what their intelligence files suggested was a peaceful gesture. Behind him came 2 other species she recognized from the old databases. Captain Chen, Zektar spoke through a translation device. I am Commander Zektar of the Galactic Council Defense Force. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Commander. Sarah nodded politely. Welcome aboard the Defiance. I understand you have a problem that requires our attention. Zektar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. Your intelligence networks still function, I see. Yes, we face extinction. A force we call the Shadow Fleet has begun consuming the galaxy. In 6 months, they've destroyed 47 worlds. Sarah led them to the briefing room where Admiral Marcus Webb waited. At 65, Webb had gray hair and scars from the last battles of the expansion wars. His presence sent a clear message about how seriously humanity took this meeting. Admiral, Zektar inclined his head, I fought against you at the Battle of Kepler's Edge. I remember. You were commanding the cruiser squadron that protected the civilian transports while your main fleet engaged us. Webb's expression remained neutral. Professional soldiers doing their duty. Even though we were invading your territory? Even though you were following bad orders from politicians who didn't understand the cost of war? Zektar activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked Shadow Fleet territory, growing larger each day. This is what we face now. Our combined fleets cannot stop them. Our weapons barely scratch their ships. They don't communicate, they don't negotiate. They simply consume everything. Admiral Webb studied the tactical display. Show me their ship configurations. The hologram shifted to show black vessels of impossible design. They seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, making them difficult to target. Their weapons fired some kind of energy that dissolved matter at the molecular level. Interesting, Webb murmured. What countermeasures have you tried? Everything. Kinetic weapons, energy weapons, electromagnetic pulse, quantum disruptors. Nothing works. Their ships seem to exist slightly out of phase with normal spacetime. Captain Chen exchanged glances with the Admiral. How do they move? Their propulsion system? We don't know. They appear and disappear without using conventional jump drives. No energy signatures we can detect. Webb stood and walked to the viewport. Earth hung in the distance, blue and white and beautiful. Why come to us? 200 years ago, the galaxy decided we were too dangerous to associate with. Because, Zektar said quietly, we may have been wrong about what constitutes danger. The Admiral turned back to face the alien commander. Explain. The Shadow Fleet fights like nothing we've ever encountered. They don't follow conventional military doctrine. They don't seem to care about losses, strategic positions, or resource management. They fight like... Zektar struggled for words. Like humans, Webb finished. Yes. During the expansion wars, you defeated forces that outnumbered you 10 to 1. You won battles that our best tactical computers said were impossible. Your species approaches warfare in ways that terrify us because we can't predict or counter your methods. Captain Chen leaned forward. You think we might understand this enemy because we're as crazy as they are? I think you might understand them because you think differently than we do. Our species evolved from prey animals, herbivores, hive minds. We fight to protect what we have. Humans evolved from persistence hunters. You fight to win. Admiral Webb accessed his personal files. Computer, display Human Defense Force current status. The hologram changed to show human space. Instead of the few dozen systems the galaxy remembered, hundreds of stars now showed human presence. Massive orbital shipyards surrounded every major world. The industrial capacity was staggering. 200 years of isolation gave us time to grow, Webb explained. We used that time to prepare for the day someone would come knocking again. We assumed it would be another invasion. This is incredible, Commander Issel breathed, seeing human space for the first time. Your population, 40 billion across 200 worlds, Captain Chen confirmed. We learned to terraform planets efficiently after you forced us to find new places to live. Zektar studied the display. Your military forces? The home fleet consists of 8,000 ships. Each outer system maintains its own defense force. Total active vessels number approximately 50,000. The alien commanders stared in shock. The entire Galactic Council fielded fewer than 20,000 ships across 12 species. How is this possible? Zektar asked. When you're surrounded by potential enemies, you prepare accordingly, Admiral Webb replied. Every human world can manufacture warships. Every citizen receives military training. We learned from the expansion wars that peace is temporary, but readiness is eternal. Zektar activated his communication device. I need to contact Admiral Korth immediately. Wait, Webb held up a hand. Before you report back to your superiors, we need to discuss terms. Terms? If humanity intervenes in this war, it won't be as subordinates to the Galactic Council. We tried cooperation before and it ended badly for everyone. Captain Chen brought up human diplomatic requirements. Complete autonomy in military operations. No council oversight of human tactics or strategy. Recognition of human territorial claims, including all systems we currently occupy. And when the war is over? Zektar asked carefully. Formal diplomatic relations based on mutual respect. Trade agreements that benefit both sides. Cultural exchanges. The kind of relationship you offered 200 years ago before your politicians decided conquest was easier than cooperation. Admiral Webb walked back to the viewport. There's something else you should know, Commander. We've been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know about the Shadow Fleet. You've known. For 3 months. We've been analyzing their tactics, their technology, their patterns of movement. And? Webb smiled grimly. We think we know what they are. More importantly, we think we know how to kill them. Zektar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The expression on the human admiral's face was exactly the same one his grandfather had described seeing at the Battle of Kepler's Edge, just before the human fleet had done the impossible and turned certain defeat into total victory. Contact Admiral Korth, Webb continued. Tell him humanity accepts the challenge. But this time we do things our way. Admiral Korth paced the command deck of his flagship, waiting for the human fleet to arrive at the rendezvous point. 3 days had passed since Commander Zektar's shocking report about human capabilities. The Galactic Council had spent those days in emergency session, debating whether to trust their former enemies. Sir, Communications Officer Viral announced, we're detecting quantum signatures. Multiple contacts approaching from the edge of the system. On screen. The view screen shimmered and revealed something that made every alien on the bridge freeze in terror. Ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, But these weren't the sleek, elegant vessels typical of galactic civilizations. These were predators made manifest in metal and energy. Human warships looked exactly like what they were, instruments of destruction. Angular hulls bristled with weapon systems. Armor plating showed scorch marks from previous battles. They moved through space with the confidence of apex predators in their natural habitat. By the ancient codes, breathed Science Officer Thane. How many ships is that? Sensors show 300 vessels, Vrel reported, her voice barely steady. That's just the advance force. Admiral Korth straightened his armored shoulders, opened communications with the human flagship. The screen flickered and Admiral Webb's face appeared. Behind him, the human bridge bustled with controlled activity. Unlike alien ship designs that prioritized comfort and aesthetics, everything visible served a military purpose. Admiral Korth, Webb nodded. We're ready to begin operations against the Shadow Fleet. Our intelligence indicates they're massing for an assault on the Vega system. Admiral Webb, with respect, 300 ships won't make a significant difference. The last Council fleet sent to face them numbered over 1,000 vessels. Webb smiled coldly. Admiral, you're thinking like a galactic commander. You see numbers and assume that's what matters. Watch and learn how humans fight wars. The human fleet began moving toward the inner system, where long-range sensors had detected Shadow Fleet activity. Their formation was unlike anything the Council forces used. Instead of the traditional battle line, human ships moved in complex three-dimensional patterns that seemed chaotic, but somehow felt threatening. Sir, Commander Zektar spoke from his position aboard Admiral Korth's flagship. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the human vessels. Their power output is extraordinary. What kind of weapons are they carrying? Admiral Korth asked. I'm not sure they are weapons in any conventional sense. The energy patterns don't match anything in our databases. On the tactical display, red contacts began appearing at the edge of the system. The Shadow Fleet had arrived just as human intelligence predicted. 30 black ships materialized from whatever dimension they used for travel, their hulls seeming to devour light itself. All Council ships, withdraw to safe distance and observe, Admiral Webb's voice commanded. Do not engage until ordered. This is a human operation. Admiral Korth wanted to protest, but something in the human admiral's tone made him hold back. He ordered his remaining ships to pull back to the outer system perimeter. The Shadow Fleet formed their standard attack formation, a sphere that would allow them to focus fire from all directions. It had proven devastatingly effective against every Council force they had faced. Their weapons began charging, the space around them rippling with dark energy. Then the human fleet did something impossible. Instead of engaging at long range like every other galactic force, they accelerated directly into the Shadow Fleet formation. Not around it, not to optimal firing positions, but straight through the center of the enemy sphere. Are they insane? Admiral Korth gasped. No, Commander Zektar whispered. They're predators. The human ships punched through the Shadow Fleet formation at incredible speed. But instead of firing conventional weapons, they released something else entirely. Clouds of metallic particles spread through space, seeming to stick to the Shadow Fleet vessels. What are they doing? Admiral Korth demanded. His answer came as the Shadow Fleet tried to phase out of normal spacetime, their standard defensive maneuver. Instead of disappearing, they remained solidly visible. The metallic particles the humans had deployed were somehow anchoring them in normal space. Impossible, breathed Science Officer Thane. Those ships exist partially in subspace. Nothing should be able to force them back into normal dimensions. Admiral Webb's voice crackled over the communication system. Quantum-entangled nanoparticles. We've been working on the theoretical framework for 200 years. Turns out isolation gives you time to solve interesting physics problems. Now the real battle began. The Shadow Fleet, forced to fight in normal space, found themselves facing an enemy that thought about warfare completely differently than anything they had encountered. Human ships didn't try to maintain formation or protect strategic positions. They swarmed like angry hornets, each vessel operating independently, but somehow coordinating with devastating effect. They used the environment itself as a weapon, detonating asteroids to create debris fields that hampered enemy movement. The Shadow Fleet's dissolving energy weapons, so effective against other galactic forces, proved less useful against human ships. Human vessels were heavily armored and compartmentalized. When sections were destroyed, the ships kept fighting. Some human vessels continued attacking even after losing half their mass. By the ancient codes, Admiral Korth muttered. They're not trying to preserve their ships. They're trying to inflict maximum damage regardless of cost. It's called total war, Commander Zektar said, remembering his studies of human military doctrine. They don't fight to minimize losses. They fight to achieve complete victory. The tide of battle shifted dramatically when the human ships began using their most devastating weapon, ramming attacks. Human vessels, their hulls reinforced with collapsed matter armor, deliberately crashed into Shadow Fleet ships at near light speed. The resulting explosions lit up space like newborn stars. They're committing suicide, Admiral Korth said in horror. No, sir, Communications Officer Varel corrected, monitoring human transmissions. Those ships ejected their crews and escape pods just before impact. The entire maneuver is automated. The human fleet commander was using his ships as guided missiles, turning each vessel into a weapon of last resort. It was a tactic so ruthless and efficient that it had never occurred to other galactic civilizations. Within an hour, the Shadow Fleet was in full retreat. Of the 30 ships that had arrived, only 7 remained functional. The human fleet had lost 40 vessels, but the surviving ships were already moving to rescue escape pods and salvage useful materials from the wreckage. Admiral Webb's face reappeared on the communication screen. His expression was grim but satisfied. Admiral Korth, the immediate threat has been neutralized. However, this was just a scouting force. The main Shadow Fleet will arrive within days. How many ships? Admiral Korth asked, though he dreaded the answer. Our deep space reconnaissance indicates approximately 3,000 vessels. They're bringing their entire force for a final offensive. The number hit the alien commanders like a physical blow. 3,000 Shadow Fleet ships would overwhelm anything the galaxy could field against them. What do you need from us? Admiral Korth asked quietly. Time and space to maneuver. We'll need to evacuate the civilian populations from the likely battle zones. And Admiral, Webb's expression grew even more serious. You should know that we're bringing the rest of our fleet. This will be the largest space battle in galactic history. How many ships can you field? All of them. Every vessel in human space is en route. Total force strength, 47,000 ships. Admiral Korth's legs gave out and he collapsed into his command chair. The humans had built a military force larger than every other galactic civilization combined. They had spent 2 centuries preparing for a war that hadn't come yet, and now they were ready to unleash that preparation against an enemy that threatened everything. Admiral Webb, Korth said finally, what do you need us to do? The assembly point was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just weeks before. Human warships stretched across an entire star system, in formations so vast they defied comprehension. Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the command center of the UES Eternal Vigilance, humanity's largest dreadnought, watching as the final elements of his fleet took their positions. Final count? Admiral, reported Fleet Coordinator Jackson, 47,312 vessels operational and ready for combat. Webb nodded, studying the tactical displays. 2 centuries of preparation had led to this moment. Every human world had contributed ships, crews, and resources for what would either be their greatest victory or their final battle. Sir, Communications Officer Park announced, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Deep Space Reconnaissance Network. The Shadow Fleet has begun moving toward the core worlds. Put it on screen. The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with red indicators marking Shadow Fleet positions. What they saw made even hardened veterans pause. The enemy force was enormous beyond previous estimates. Instead of 3,000 ships, sensors detected over 5,000 vessels moving in perfect coordination. They've been hiding reserve forces in subspace, analyzed. Intelligence Director Sarah Kim. Our previous encounters were just testing our capabilities, Admiral. Webb called an immediate conference with his senior commanders. Within minutes, the briefing room filled with humanity's finest military minds. General Morrison from the Marine Corps, Admiral Chen from the Outer Colonies Fleet, Admiral Rodriguez from Deep Strike Command, and dozens of others who had spent their entire careers preparing for this day. The situation has changed, Webb began without preamble. We're facing 5,000 enemy vessels, not 3,000. They've learned from our previous engagement and adapted their tactics. How? Admiral Chen asked, pulling up detailed scans of the enemy fleet. They're no longer using pure subspace phasing. They've developed hybrid technology, that lets them partially exist in normal space while maintaining their defensive advantages. Our quantum entangled nanoparticles will be less effective. General Morrison leaned forward. Recommendations? We use our advantages. Superior numbers, better intelligence, and more aggressive tactics. But this won't be the quick victory we hoped for. Admiral Rodriguez activated his tactical interface. What about civilian evacuations? The Council estimates 12 billion beings in the potential battle zone. The Galactic Council has agreed to handle evacuations using their transport fleets. Our job is to buy them time and eliminate the Shadow Fleet threat permanently. Webb brought up the strategic overview. We're going to use the Centauri Gambit. The room fell silent. Every officer present knew the plan by reputation. It was the most aggressive strategy in human military doctrine, designed for situations where conventional tactics would fail. Sir, Admiral Chen said carefully, the Centauri Gambit has never been tested on this scale. The coordination requirements alone are exactly why we've been drilling fleet maneuvers for 200 years. Webb finished. Every ship commander knows their role. Every crew has practiced these formations until they can execute them in their sleep. The Centauri Gambit was deceptively simple in concept, but extraordinarily complex in execution. Instead of meeting the enemy in traditional battle lines, the human fleet would split into dozens of independent task forces, each operating autonomously while following an overarching strategic pattern. We'll hit them from every direction simultaneously, Webb explained. No fixed battle lines, no predictable formations. Pure chaos that looks random but follows mathematical principles they won't be able to analyze in real time. Fleet Coordinator Jackson brought up personnel statistics. Sir, casualties estimates for this strategy are unacceptable under normal circumstances, Webb acknowledged. But these aren't normal circumstances. If we fail here, there won't be a human civilization to worry about casualties. The next 18 hours were controlled chaos as the human fleet repositioned itself according to the Centauri Gambit requirements. Ships that had trained together for decades separated into new formations. Communication networks reconfigured to handle thousands of simultaneous tactical channels. Commander Zektar, observing from the Council liaison ship, watched the preparations with growing amazement. I've never seen anything like this level of coordination. How do they manage such complex maneuvers? Captain Chen, assigned as his liaison officer, smiled grimly. Every human child learns basic military tactics in school. Every adult serves at least 2 years in the defense forces. We don't have professional soldiers and civilian populations. We have a civilization that's also an army. But the logistics, the supply chains, the coordination have been practiced continuously for 2 centuries. We've run galaxy-wide military exercises every year since the expansion wars ended. This is what we've been training for. The Shadow Fleet arrived exactly when human intelligence predicted they would. 5,000 vessels emerged from subspace at the edge of the Vega system, their black hulls creating patches of absolute darkness against the stars. They moved with the same terrifying coordination they had shown in previous battles, forming attack formations that had proven devastatingly effective against Council forces. All ships, Admiral Webb broadcast on the fleet-wide channel. This is eternal vigilance. Execute Centauri Gambit. Good hunting. What happened next would be studied in military academies for millennia to come. The human fleet exploded outward in what appeared to be complete chaos. Ships scattered in every direction, some diving toward the system's star, others climbing toward the galactic plane, still others accelerating directly toward the enemy formation. From the Shadow Fleet's perspective, they faced an enemy that had lost all cohesion and was fleeing in panic. They began pursuit, breaking their own formations, to chase down what appeared to be individual human ships running for their lives. It was exactly what Admiral Webb wanted them to. Do Phase 1 complete, reported Fleet Coordinator Jackson. Enemy formations disrupted. All task forces report ready for Phase 2. Webb watched the tactical display with the patience of an apex predator. The Shadow Fleet ships were spreading out across the system, pursuing individual human vessels that always stayed just ahead of them, never quite close enough to engage effectively. Execute Phase 2. The fleeing human ships suddenly reversed course, but they didn't attack their pursuers. Instead, they began converging on predetermined coordinates throughout the system. The Shadow Fleet, realizing they had been led into a trap, tried to reform their defensive formations. Too late. Human task forces that had appeared to be fleeing in random directions revealed themselves to be following carefully calculated paths. They converged on isolated shadow fleet vessels from multiple directions simultaneously, concentrating overwhelming firepower on individual targets before the enemy could respond. "It's beautiful," Commander Zektar whispered, watching the tactical display. "They're not fighting a battle. They're conducting a symphony of destruction." The Shadow Fleet found itself facing an enemy that was everywhere and nowhere at once. Every time they tried to concentrate forces, human ships would strike from unexpected directions. When they tried to spread out to counter the human tactics, they found themselves outnumbered at every point of contact. "Admiral," Communications Officer Park reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the Shadow Fleet. They're trying to communicate." Webb raised an eyebrow. "After 6 months of refusing all contact, they want to talk now? Put it through." The screen flickered and showed nothing, just blackness with hints of movement in the depths. "We did not expect resistance of this magnitude." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere like whispers in an empty room. "You fight differently than the others." "We fight to win," Admiral Webb replied simply. "Surrender now and your surviving ships will be allowed to withdraw." "Impossible. We are inevitable. We have consumed hundreds of civilizations. None of them were human." There was a long pause. When the voice returned, it carried something that might have been uncertainty. "What are you?" Admiral Webb stared into the darkness on the communication screen, studying what little he could see of humanity's mysterious enemy. The Shadow Fleet had finally broken their silence, but their question hung in the void like a challenge. "What are you?" "We're the species you should have contacted first instead of last," Webb replied. "We're the ones who understand what you really are." The darkness on the screen seemed to shift, as if something vast was moving just beyond visual range. "Impossible. You are, like the others, carbon-based, finite, weak. Are we?" Webb signaled to Intelligence Director Kim, who activated a new display showing detailed scans of Shadow Fleet vessels. "Computer, analyze enemy ship construction and compare to known galactic database." The results appeared on screen in real time. The Shadow Fleet ships showed energy signatures and construction patterns that didn't match any known technology. But they did match something else entirely. "You're not from this galaxy," Webb announced. "You're not even from this universe. You're refugees." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background noise from the Shadow Fleet ship seemed to stop. "Your home reality is dying or already dead," Webb continued. "You've been jumping from universe to universe, consuming what you need to survive. But each jump makes you weaker, forces you to exist partially outside normal space-time. How, do you know?" The voice carried a note of something that might have been fear. Director Kim took over the briefing. "We've been studying interdimensional physics for 2 centuries. The energy patterns you emit, the way your ships phase in and out of normal space, the seemingly impossible coordination between vessels. You're quantum entangled across dimensional barriers." Admiral Chen stepped forward. "That's why our conventional enemies couldn't fight you effectively. They were trying to battle you in normal space while most of your ships existed elsewhere, but we know how to collapse those barriers." "The quantum-entangled nanoparticles were just the beginning," Webb explained. "We've been preparing for interdimensional warfare since our scientists first theorized about hostile entities from parallel realities." The darkness on the screen rippled with what looked like agitation. "You cannot comprehend our power. We have consumed entire galactic clusters in dying universes," Webb pointed out. "Here in our reality, you're vulnerable. Your ships are impressive, but they're running on reserves. You can't replenish your forces, can't repair your technology, can't even exist fully in our spacetime." General Morrison activated the tactical display showing current battle status. After 6 hours of fighting, the human fleet had destroyed nearly half the Shadow Fleet with minimal losses. The Centauri Gambit was working perfectly, but more importantly, the enemy was showing clear signs of desperation. "Your remaining ships are operating at 60% efficiency," Morrison reported. "Energy output dropping, response times increasing, coordination breaking down. You're dying. We must survive." The voice carried genuine anguish now. "Our people, our children, all that remains of our reality." For the first time since the conversation began, Admiral Webb's expression softened slightly. How many of you are there? How many survivors? Billions. Scattered across the fleet. In stasis. Waiting for a new home. And you thought you'd find it by destroying everyone already here? We tried peaceful contact. In other realities, we're betrayed, hunted, learned to take what we needed before others could strike first. Commander Zektar, listening from the Council liaison ship, felt his understanding of the situation shift completely. These weren't conquerors. They were refugees whose desperation had turned them into monsters. Admiral Webb, Zektar's voice came over the communication channel. Perhaps there's another way to resolve this. Speak. The galaxy has plenty of uninhabited systems, worlds that could be terraformed, space that could support new civilizations. If they're truly refugees, no. The Shadow Fleet voice cut across the channel. We tried cooperation, trust, in 7 realities. Each time, betrayal, death, extinction. We will not be victims again. Admiral Webb studied the tactical display. The human fleet could win this battle, but the cost would be enormous on both sides. Millions of human lives, billions of refugee lives, all lost because fear and desperation had replaced reason. There's a third option, he said finally, one that doesn't require trust. Explain. Mutual assured destruction. We have the power to destroy your entire fleet. You have the power to take a significant portion of the galaxy with you before you die. Neither of us gets what we want, but both of us lose everything. You would threaten genocide? I'm pointing out the reality of our situation. But here's what makes humans different from the other species you've encountered. We're also capable of unprecedented cooperation when survival is at stake. Webb activated a new display, showing detailed scans of uninhabited sectors in the galactic rim. The outer spiral arms have thousands of systems with no sentient life. Habitable worlds, useful resources, enough space for billions of beings to build new civilizations. And, in exchange, we cease hostilities? More than that. We help you settle. We share technology that will let you exist fully in normal space-time instead of burning energy to maintain partial existence. We provide protection during your vulnerable settlement period. The darkness on the screen seemed to intensify. Why would you offer this after we have destroyed your allies' worlds? Because we understand desperation. 200 years ago, we were facing extinction too. The difference is we had time to prepare alternatives instead of just lashing out. Admiral Chen brought up historical records from the expansion wars. When the galactic powers tried to contain us, we could have responded with total war. Instead, we withdrew to our territory and spent 2 centuries building strength while staying isolated. We learned that survival sometimes requires patience. Your species fought wars, consumed resources, destroyed environments. You are like us. We were like you, Webb corrected. We learned to be better, not because we became peaceful, but because we became smart. We discovered that cooperation multiplied strength while conflict divided it. General Morrison stepped forward. We're making this offer once. Immediate ceasefire, withdrawal to designated settlement zones, and a formal peace treaty. Or we finish this fight and see which of us has anything left standing afterward. The communication channel went silent for long minutes. The Shadow Fleet ships had stopped all aggressive maneuvers but remained in defensive positions. The human fleet held their formations, weapons powered but not firing. Finally, the voice returned, different somehow. Multiple tones speaking in harmony. We have conferred with our collective. The offer is acceptable, but we require guarantees, name them, territorial sovereignty, no interference. In our internal governance, protection from other galactic powers, during settlement, and there was a long pause, teaching how to exist without consuming others. Admiral Webb looked around the command center at his officers. Humanity was about to make the biggest diplomatic decision in galactic history. The wrong choice could doom everyone. The right choice might save not just the galaxy, but an entire species of refugees who had lost everything except their desperation. Agreed, he said finally, on one condition. Full disclosure about your dimensional jumping technology. If there are other refugee fleets out there, We need to know about them before they become everyone else's problem. Acceptable. We will transmit all relevant data, beginning settlement, protocols immediately. The great battle was over, but Admiral Webb knew the real work was just beginning. Turning desperate refugees into peaceful neighbors would be the challenge of a lifetime. But humans had always been good at impossible tasks. 1 year after the Shadow Fleet War, Admiral Marcus Webb stood in the observation lounge of the UES New Horizons, watching the construction of Refuge Prime. The massive space station would serve as the first permanent settlement for the beings who had once been humanity's greatest threat. The station was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human industrial capacity had provided the raw materials and construction techniques, while Shadow Fleet technology contributed dimensional stabilization systems that allowed the structure to exist partially in subspace for expanded internal volume. Council species had offered cultural consultation and biological expertise for creating environments suitable for refugee populations. Amazing what a year can accomplish, Dr. Sarah Kim commented, joining Webb at the viewport. She now served as Director of Interdimensional Research, leading the team studying Shadow Fleet technology and its implications. Any word from the deep space monitoring stations? Webb asked. 3 more refugee fleets detected in the past month, all from different dead realities, all showing similar desperation patterns, but now that we understand the phenomenon, we're ready for them. Through the viewport, Webb could see human ships working alongside Shadow Fleet vessels. The former enemies moved with careful coordination, building something that neither species could have accomplished alone. Trust was still fragile, but it was growing. Commander Zektar approached from the other end of the lounge. His role had evolved from military liaison to diplomatic coordinator for the Galactic Council's Refugee Integration Program. Admiral, we've received final approval from the Council for the expanded settlement protocols. All 12 species agreed. Unanimously. The economic benefits alone convinced the holdouts. Refugee technologies have already revolutionized our understanding of dimensional physics, quantum mechanics, and biological preservation. The knowledge exchange is proving more valuable than anyone anticipated. Webb nodded, watching construction crews install another section of habitat modules. Each module was designed to support different atmospheric requirements and gravitational preferences. The refugees weren't a single species, but rather survivors from multiple civilizations that had banded together across dimensional barriers. How are the integration programs progressing? He asked. Dr. Kim activated a holographic display showing statistics from refugee settlements throughout the galactic rim. Better than expected. The psychological profile teams have identified the core issue. These beings weren't naturally aggressive. Centuries of dimensional jumping, watching reality after reality die, had created a collective trauma response. And the treatment? Stability, purpose, hope for the future. Once they understood that this reality was stable and they were welcome to contribute rather than consume, the aggression patterns began fading. Commander Zektar brought up reports from the various settlement worlds. The agricultural settlements in the Kepler sector are already producing surplus food using refugee cultivation techniques. The mining operations in the asteroid belt have tripled efficiency using their matter phase technology. Any problems? Minor cultural friction in some areas, but nothing that proper mediation hasn't resolved. The refugees are eager to prove they can be beneficial neighbors rather than threats. Admiral Webb activated his personal communication device. Webb to Shadow Collective Leadership. Status report on fleet integration. The response came immediately. The multi-tonal voice that had once threatened galactic extinction now carrying notes of cautious optimism. Admiral Webb, integration proceeding. Ahead of schedule. Our people adapt to stability with gratitude. We have not known peace in millennia. Any technical issues with the dimensional stabilization systems? Minor calibrations only. Your engineers learn quickly. Our technology becomes more efficient. In stable reality, we can finally repair and improve instead of merely survive. Dr. Kim leaned closer to the communication device. Shadow Collective, this is Director Kim. We'd like to begin the next phase of technology sharing. Our theoretical physicists have some ideas about improving your dimensional anchoring systems. Acceptable. We welcome collaboration, knowledge shared. Benefits all, The communication ended and Webb returned his attention to the viewport. In the distance, he could see a human patrol squadron conducting joint exercises with Shadow Fleet vessels. 6 months ago, such a sight would have meant imminent battle. Now it represented the future of galactic security. "Admiral," Commander Zektar said quietly, "there's something the Council wants to discuss with you. A formal proposal. Speak freely. The member species have been talking. What humans accomplished here, turning potential galactic extinction into an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation, has impressed everyone. The Council would like to offer humanity full membership and a seat on the Security Committee." Webb raised an eyebrow. "The same Council that declared us too dangerous for contact 200 years ago? Circumstances change. We've learned that dangerous to enemies and dangerous to allies are very different things. Humanity proved that when you had every opportunity to dominate the galaxy, you chose partnership instead." Dr. Kim smiled. "Plus, they want access to our military doctrine and defensive technologies before the next interdimensional crisis arrives." "There will be more crises," Webb acknowledged. "Dr. Kim's research suggests that reality collapse might be more common than we initially thought. Dead universes producing refugee fleets that spread across dimensional barriers looking for new homes. Which is exactly why the galaxy needs human leadership," Commander Zektar said. "You've proven you can handle threats that conventional military doctrine can't address." Webb watched as a group of refugee children, their forms barely visible in environmental suits designed for their unique physiology, took their first tour of a human recreational facility. Human and alien children played together under careful supervision, creating friendships that would shape the future of galactic civilization. "Tell the Council we accept membership. With conditions. Name them. Human military autonomy remains absolute. We'll coordinate with Council forces, but we won't subordinate our defensive capabilities to committee decisions. Second, the refugee settlement program becomes a permanent galactic priority with dedicated funding and resources." Agreed. "What else?" "Establishment of the interdimensional monitoring network. If we're going to face more refugee fleets, we need early warning systems and standardized first contact protocols. No more shooting first and asking questions later." Commander Zektar activated his recording device. "I'll present these terms to the Council, but I expect unanimous approval. After what happened here, no one wants to face the next crisis without human support." As evening approached, the 3 officers made their way to the station's main conference room, where representatives from all participating species had gathered for the weekly coordination meeting. Humans, Council members, and Shadow Fleet refugees worked together on logistics, resource allocation, and long-term planning. Admiral Webb took his seat at the head of the conference table, looking around at faces that represented dozens of species from multiple realities. 6 months ago, most of these beings had been enemies. Now they were building something unprecedented in galactic history. "Ladies, gentlemen, and collective entities," he began, "let's talk about the future." The meeting that followed would establish protocols that would govern interdimensional relations for centuries to come. They discussed early warning systems for detecting dimensional instabilities, standardized refugee settlement procedures, and mutual defense agreements that would protect all realities from the kind of collapse that had created the crisis in the first place. As the session concluded, Admiral Webb realized that humanity had finally found its place in galactic civilization. Not as conquerors or isolationists, but as protectors who understood that sometimes the greatest threats could become the greatest allies if you had the wisdom to offer hope instead of violence. The galaxy had avoided extinction, but more importantly, it had learned to grow stronger through cooperation rather than conflict. And at the center of it all, humanity had proven that being dangerous was only valuable if you were dangerous to the right things. The Shadow Fleet War was over, but the real victory was just beginning.